Hello, welcome to Autistic Chess Openings. Today we're working on the Scotch Gambit, line number 1. Alright, so for those of you who are here, well, let's start with the Scotch Gambit. There we go. For those of you who are here for the review of the moves, let's start with that. So we're working on the bishop b4 check variation, the 5th most common variation. They check you here, you push the pawn, they take, you take, they back off, you castle, they go d6. They should go bishop to b6 there to prevent my next queen move, but they don't. They go d6. So I do my queen move, attacking f7. They bring their queen to defend f7, and then I push e5 to bust this open. They need to take with the knight at this point, but 51% of the time they take with the pawn. When they take with the pawn, you're going to be 300 points ahead. You're basically a piece up if you can cash it in. So we're going to cash it in. So we go bishop to a3, attacking that queen. The queen goes to f6. And now your knight starts a journey to drive that queen and then attack f7 and get another piece on it. Which knight? This knight. So you go knight to d2. They bring their knight to e7 so they can get castled, and to clear the knight out of the way for castling and to block your bishop from stopping that. And then you bring your knight up attacking their queen. They move their queen to the side, and then you move your knight for the 3rd time and put more pressure on f7. Now you have 3 attackers there, and he only has 2 defenders, so he castles to get a 3rd defender there. After he castles, you're gonna unwind your attack. You're gonna take the bishop that's not part of the attack on f7 and hit that knight on e7 first. So that distracts the other knight that then goes back and recaptures it. That will be important in a minute. Now you do the fork here of the king and queen with the knight backing it up, forcing him to take back with the rook. And it looks like that was a bad move because it was 3 on 3. Well, it's now another attacker is going to join the fray. As soon as that rook takes back, it's now pinned. You bring your knight to e5, snagging another pawn in the process and putting another piece on f7. There is no good piece on the board to go and defend that. So most of the time, 41% of the time, they use their queen to take that knight that's no longer defended. And now you can just pop off that rook check. They go into the corner. You appear to checkmate them, but they can block. And then you checkmate them for real with the knight. And that's the line. All right. So let's get into the line. Let's start with, this is leadchess.org. There are 7.6 billion games listed here. If I go to the settings and I set all time controls and all ratings, it shows me all games, 7.6 billion. That's important because if I'm going to master this opening, I need to learn how to play it against masters and amateurs alike. No matter what my opponent throws at me, I need to be able to play it well. So we do the Scotch Gambit, get it all ready. And now we're working on the bishop to b4 line with the check. Why that one and not these 4 that are more common? Normally I go from the most common to the least common. Right now we're starting with this one so that I can demonstrate my system because this is a very pretty variation. So we're going to do this one. So they go bishop b4 check. At this point, well, yes. At this point, 90% of people do c3 as white. We don't care about that. We're going to be picking our own moves. We're not going to be going by what's popular. By what's common on lead chess. That's how we're going to figure out what our opponents are going to be playing the majority of the time. When it's time for our moves, I use my secret weapon here on the side, this program that I built. It uses Stockfish 18 and it pre-calculates scores ahead of time so that I can browse positions. So here's the starting position of chess. Here's the 20 legal moves. Here's the 2 most common moves. I define common as anything that's above 10%. So only e4 and d4 are above 10% in how frequent they are at the very beginning of the game. So let's catch this one up. So we got e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, d4, e takes d4, bishop to c4. All right, Scotch Gambit, and then bishop b4 check. So notice bishop b4 is grayed out over here. That's because it's not common. These are the 4 common moves. Knight f6, bishop c5, d6, and h6. The same 4 that we see right here. Bishop b4 check. Let's hit it. Even though it's grayed out, I can still click it. I can right click this and make it gray or not gray. So I click into it, and yes, I chose c3 as my best move. I can see the scores here, and I looked at the others. Here's bishop d2. I look down that line, and I can see all of those pre-compiled. Every single one of these has been pre-calculated to a depth of 200 million nodes apiece. So they're pretty deep, and they're very accurate, but most importantly, it's node depth instead of move depth or time depth, how much time it's spent on the position. It needs to be nodes. Why? So that these scores are, when I compare them, I'm comparing apples to apples. That only works if you do nodes. The explanation for that is involved, so we'll skip it. So notice this is recalculating at every step. So right here, at the beginning of the game, it thinks white's ahead by 27 points by playing knight f3 as its best move. Then you go forward and it says, actually, okay, so I do e4, it thinks the score is 26. Then it says, actually, it's 24. Actually, it's 19. Actually, it's 24. And it's changing its mind because it can see more now. Every time it steps forward and looks 200 million nodes into the future, it's removing everything that was behind it as you step forward. So this is how we compete with people who have supercomputers and tons of resources. We get these things pre-calculated and go to a good depth that shows the cream at the top, and maybe not with maybe I'm only getting 90% accuracy instead of 98% accuracy by not using a supercomputer, but by stepping in deeper, that gives me more accuracy. I only have binoculars. They have a telescope. They're looking from far away. I keep stepping closer and then reevaluating and reevaluating. And by doing that, I can draw a map and figure out what is good and what is not just as effectively, even more so in my opinion. So anyway, actually I've seen that to be the case. All right, so here we are in the Scotch Gambit. So these are the engine pre-calculated Stockfish 18 engine scores at a depth of 200 million nodes, and here's bishop b4 check. All right, so there we go. We're starting. So c3 is your only good move here. So you do c3. Now d takes c3 is their only good move. They're 10 points ahead if they do it. They're 150 points behind if they don't. A positive number here means that white's ahead. A negative number here means that black is ahead. So -10 here, black's winning. 150 positive, white would be winning, so they're going to take. All right, so they take, and now their lead of 10 points ahead is only 5 points ahead now if I take back with the b pawn. Now let's pause here and look at the castling versus taking back with the b pawn. I've seen other videos showing people castling here, and it's a viable, good move. I prefer the b pawn taking instead. Why? Because there's 4 things I care about. If I'm preparing against a computer, then I only care about the engine strength. That is my only criteria that matters. But I'm not a computer. My opponents are not computers. We have limited time. We can't. Chess is an ocean. We can't examine every drop in a lifetime, not even in a million lifetimes. It's too big. So if we're mapping out our openings, we want to reduce how much we have to memorize, so we care about the branching. We want to find moves where the good moves, when it's our opponent's turn, the good moves look bad, the bad moves look good, and they have a high chance of messing that up. And so we're looking for things that humans are bad at and computers are good at, all of it. And so we're looking for things that are very difficult. So we're looking for moves that the good moves are counterintuitive. Well, how do we find that? Well, that's what the move frequency on when it's their turn is over here. So we'll see that in a minute. Look, we'll do the b takes c3. So b takes c3. All right. Bishop to a5. They back up. You go and castle. Castle. At this point, they need to go bishop b6. Why is that counterintuitive to find? That's their best move. Because I'm castled. My e-pawn is out 2 squares. Their d-pawn isn't even pushed at all. Why does that matter? Because if they try and bring their knight to f6, my e-pawn can go forward, and their d-pawn's not there to stop it. Their knight's in the way of their king. They can't castle. Their bishop can't get out because of that d-pawn. They look like a sitting duck. And what's the rule that we've always heard? Don't move the same piece twice. Well, the engine says move this twice, move this to b6. And that's their top move. And so that's the reason people don't see that. So I'm less concerned about them pulling that move out of their hat. I do need to prepare for it eventually because it does happen 9% of the time, but not until I got these other 3 down. So, and the d6 one, yeah, let's back up now. All right, so here we are. We just played c3. B takes c3. And we were deciding whether to castle or go b takes c3. Well, if you castle, there's 4 common moves by my opponent. If you take with a pawn, there's only 3. And let's look how fruitful they are. If you go and do b takes, now if they go bishop e7, they lose a knight immediately. They go bishop e7, Then I go queen d5. That's checkmate unless they bring their knight out to defend. I pop that knight off. They can't take back because I'm about to checkmate them, so they have to castle. My bishop escapes. It's a free knight. And you can see that the score is 398 there, and yet bishop to e7 happens how often? After b takes c3, it happens 14% of the time. Bishop to c5 happens 26% of the time. When they go there, you take at f7. The king takes, you come over and check in the middle. Their king moves, and then you pop off the bishop. And now they can't castle, and they just lost a pawn, and their score is -57, and they have a very difficult position to play because there's all kinds of missteps that they can do from that point onward because their king's in the middle. So this is a lot more uncomfortable for them. They need to do bishop a5. And when they do bishop a5, then you castle, they need to find bishop b6, and most people don't. And after they do, and if they do d6, which looks pretty good, then this queen b3 makes it so they got to go queen e7, and then you hit e5. And now they need to see that that pawn taking is really bad, or they drop 300 points. This line is full of traps. When I look down the castling line over here, I don't see so many when I go down that line. Let's back this up and explore that line. So you push the pawn, they take, I castle. All right. I've explored down these, and they don't look as promising. The scores aren't as high. I have more to learn, and there's not as many traps. So it's not as tricky. So b takes c3 wins over castling, in my opinion. So I'm going to do that move. And yet a lot of people are just going to grab the castling instead because the engine scored it 5 points higher, which is just it's still within the range of random fluctuations. So it's not as important to capture every single point that you can get with engine score. It's more important that you pick good lines. All right, so you castle, they go d6. Is that where we were? Let's see, b takes, bishop a5. Yeah, let's get to there. So I take with the b pawn, I don't castle. They back off to a5. We're learning that line because them backing off happens 50% of the time. These other moves I showed you, bishop c5 and bishop to e7, don't happen as much. So bishop a5. All right, now I castle. And that is my only good move. Everything else, I lose a ton of points, and black's winning. So I have to castle here. We're dancing on a knife's edge as to who has the lead. It's me, then it's them, then it's me, then it's them. And it's just very, very close to 0 in both cases. At this point, let's see, let me get my bearings here. They just backed off and I castled. Okay, they just backed off and I castled. Got it. All right, they played d6 here instead of bishop b6 the majority of the time, 31%. So we're going to start with that one. They go d6, and now I hit queen b3. So let's hit d6 over here, and then take a look at queen b3. There are no other good moves. I looked at knight at b to d2 just to make sure, and because again, I'm only going 200 million nodes deep and not a billion or more. So I double check on anything that's even remotely close just to be sure. And sure enough, that leaves them with 3 responses where they're ahead, making it pretty guaranteed that they're going to have a move. At least one of them is going to definitely pan out where they're ahead. And this one puts me way ahead, queen b3. Well, a good initiative. And it's very tricky. They need to play very carefully here. All right, so queen e7 happens 57% of the time. That's the lion's share. That's more than queen f6, queen d7, and all the other moves put together. So that gives us a lot of coverage by only learning one line. That really helps reduce our branching, which is one of the 4 qualities I care about. So they go queen e7. At that point, e5 is your killer move. That starts to break things up. You push e5, and take a look at what they have to do. They have to do knight takes e5 here. Everything else is 250 points or worse. King f8? I mean, who finds king f8? And like, how is that better than everything else? Jeez, that looks like garbage. And yet, it's the second best move. You need to take with the knight. So why aren't people taking with the knight? Well, because you got this check at b5 with your queen, attacking their bishop at the same time, forking it, and so they got to bring the knight back to block the check and defend the bishop. And then you can bring your rook out to e1, pinning their queen to their king, which they don't like, so they got to block that with bishop to d6, which you have a bunch of pressure on. And you'll have 3 pieces on that, and he'll have 1, 2 defenders, and it makes them very nervous they're going to lose their queen, and so they won't take with the knight. They take with the pawn most of the time, 51% of the time. And the other times, 14% of the time, they're doing bishop e6. Look how bad that move is. So this is a very nice direction to lead them down. You're running through a forest that you grew up in and know where all the landmines are, and you're running them through an area where the landmines are in the most counterintuitive places possible. And they have to find it on the fly with a time limit. And even if they do find it, they waste a lot of time finding it and figuring it out, giving you another advantage in time control. So you go e5. We're going to learn d takes e5 because that's what happens most of the time. We need to learn how to punish this and win the game from it. D takes e5. So you're now 300 points ahead. That's a minor piece, but only if you know how to cash it in. And check it out. If you don't do bishop to a3, you lose a good chunk of that. And if you look at knight at b to d2 just to make sure it's not fluctuating, it's not that hard for them to keep that better score. We need to go bishop a3 to maximize the punishment. So we go bishop to a3, attacking the queen on e7. And now they go queen f6 93% of the time. How's that for branching? You don't need to prepare for anything else. Sometimes, 6% of the time, they go queen to d7 instead, but that blocks in their bishop, and that's very counterintuitive, and they don't want to do that. It also is a spot where your rook can come over to d1 and attack it, which makes them nervous. And so they're hiding their queen behind that pawn, and they're trying to put it somewhere safe, and f6 looks a lot safer. So 93% of the time, they're going to go there. So you get no branching there, practically. So they go queen f6. And now take a look at this. You are now in a position where all of that advantage you built up can be thrown away by not doing knight at b to d2. If you do any other move, you completely flush down the drain that entire advantage, or worse. So you go knight at b to d2. And why is it so critical to do that at this moment? Well, it's going to attack the queen, and then it's going to put another piece on f7. It looks slow, but he's got to go slow too. He's got a knight there keeping him from castling. Your bishop's cutting him off from castling. Castling on the queen's side doesn't work. If he moves that bishop, you just pop off the pawn on b7 and fork the rook and knight. So he's got to castle kingside. How does he do that? With the knight in the way and with the bishop stopping him? Knight to e7. And so 48% of the time, they're doing that move. So they go knight to e7, knight at g to e7. And now you go knight to e4. There were two good moves there, as you could see. The rook at a to e1, I looked down that line. It does not look nearly as forcing and as nasty and difficult for them to play. So I go knight e4, gaining time on their queen. That's now at f6. They then move it to g6. Here's what's funny. So it needs to move, and it needs to defend f7. It could go to f4. It could go to f5. It can go, so let's see, f5, f4, or g6. Why does 76% of the population that gets to this position go to g6? It's counterintuitive to... People don't like their queen defending something from far away. It's harder to see. It's harder to see attacks from far away. It's harder to see defending from far away. And it also feels like it's more vulnerable as it gets closer to my pieces. It's almost like they instinctively feel like one of my pieces is going to be able to strike at it, even though it can't. If that queen comes to f5 or f4 and I strike at it with my pawn, he'll just pop off this knight on f3. And if he goes to f5, yeah, my knight can go to g3 and attack it, but then that removes its ability to come and attack f7. And so it would be better for their queen to go to f5 and f4. And let's look at that. Look at how much better f4 is. 321 points. g6, 407. They lose another 86 points. So they go queen g6. That's another reason this line is so good. Let's see, queen g6. And now you got three possibilities, and they all look juicy. I explored them all, and knight at e to g5 takes the cake by far. It looks like it's the lowest scoring of the three, but trust me, it's better. This one that says 439, once you go deeper, it's really 407. This one that's 400 is 404, and they got several possible moves. If you go knight at e to g5, they only have one response. You don't have to learn a ton of variations. They're going to castle 96% of the time, and it's going to fail. And it's going to give you another 399, 473, another 74 points. We are just racking these points up almost to a whole rook. So what do they need to do? They need to go bishop e6 in order to keep that score lower. They need to take the hit now and capitulate, which no one likes to do. They think they can hold the position by castling, and that probably is the better way to go, because if I don't see the right attack, they can escape. Or they can just let me take my advantage now and reduce it a little bit. Which one would you do? So 96% of the time, they castle. And now, after they castle, you can see bishop, you've got some moves here. Bishop takes e7 is the top move. Knight takes f7 is also strong. We're not going to do that one. Bishop takes e7 is much better. It says 480 points. It's going to go up more, because when you take, they now need to do h6 and not take back. I mean, how many people are going to find that? Let's see. They castle, bishop takes. Right, let me comment on this real quick. So they castle, they have 3 defenders on f7, I have 3 attackers on f7, and it looks like they're holding the position. This is where you're going to unwind all this kinetic energy you've stored, all this, sorry, the other one, potential energy you've saved. So you're going to hit that bishop on e7, hit that knight on e7 with your bishop on a3 to distract this knight that's on c6 that's defending e4. That's how you're going to start. This bishop isn't needed for the attack. It's not even on f7. It's going to remove a key player. So you do that trade, and if they take back right here, this take back move here, they lose a ton more points again. They need to do that. What the heck is that? Or that. And the reason those moves are the best moves is because of the failure that's about to happen when they take back with a knight, which is this fork here. Bishop forks the king and queen. The rook has to take it because there's a knight defending it, so the rook takes. And now you've got 2 attackers, 2 defenders. It looks like you shouldn't have attacked because he had equal defenders as you had attackers. But right here, once that rook is pinned, you attack it with a 3rd piece, and he cannot get another defender over there. And it looks like that you just abandoned your other knight, because when you went forward with this knight, it left the other one undefended. And sure enough, 41% of the time, they pounce on that and grab that knight, and they lose the game. Check, check, and mate. And there's your line. So that is the most common line if you play the moves I'm showing you in the bishop to b4 check response to the Scotch Gambit. And later we will cover the 2nd most common and the 3rd most common, but not until we go back to the Scotch Gambit and start covering knight f6, bishop c5, h6, and d6. Until next time, thank you.